You know when you're really upset and you just want to punch something to let the anger out? Like, I'm lucky I have a little brother, I just punch him and I feel better instantly, but sadly, he's growing up, so if I punch him, he might punch back, and I don't want to risk that. The problem is, I don't have a great replacement. Nothing beats a good, solid knockout blow straight to my younger brother's jaw, especially when I fly into a heated gamer rage. Nothing does the trick. Not punching the couch, not flinging my controller through a wall into the other room, nothing but the sweet sensation of fist on bone and flesh will satiate my need for vengeance on Rango Bunny. It's at this point I should probably mention that I don't hit my brother. It was a joke. If you're listening to this, Child Protective Services, I was kidding, and if he tells you otherwise, I'm gonna hire a trained assassin and shoot him in the face. Lucky for me, I no longer have to face potential incarceration every time I get bonked in the head in a difficult game, because a rising number of titles are incorporating systems that allow you to aggressively retaliate immediately to a moment of failure and use that to gain the advantage once again. They recreated the feeling of responding to any mild inconvenience with a good old-fashioned heater, which makes you feel instantly better. That's right, today we're talking about the genius of aggressive health systems. Wait, you saw the title, so you knew that already. Damn it. Healing systems have evolved a lot from where they started. Initially, it wasn't even common for them to exist. Games had you die instantly the second that you messed up, or some had a small handful of hit points that couldn't be recovered, so you got shot a couple times and it's game over. And usually this did come hand in hand with an actual life system, but that is completely different from a health system. Eventually, as time went on, we got to limited health, which could be recovered from health items that would be strewn across a battlefield, or maybe dropped from enemies or found in hidden areas. Once games became more and more accessible and to many people got way easier, we saw the rise of regenerative health, which was a lot more convenient, and it fit the tone of certain games way more than a giant floating health pack would. And although this is convenient to the player, it also faces some heat for encouraging cowardice and resulting in harder difficulties in these games turning into glorified whack-a-mole. On a different side of things, we also got health packs and variations thereupon. These let you heal a limited amount of time just like health items, but you could carry these over and accumulate a certain amount of these to use at your leisure when you got in a jam. And in my opinion, these are the most effective in games where finding enough time in the middle of a fight to actually use the health pack is a major struggle. Like for example, a survival horror game or a tough action title with aggressive enemies. We've also seen hybrid systems that combine a few of these ideas, like how I believe Halo was the one that started the trend of having a recharging shield but non-recharging health. So you always had some protection which recharged, but if you wanted to be at full defense, you needed to pick up health items. We've seen a lot of other unique spins on healing as the years have gone on, but I think none are as interesting, game-changing, and exorbitant to fun as what I call active/aggressive healing systems. These systems, as of now, are usually part of a whole. That is to say, they're usually paired to some degree with more conventional healing methods. But we have seen recently an example of aggressive healing being basically your only means of regaining health. This type of healing method has even found its way to games like Outriders, which was the newest attempt at the next big looter-shooter RPG. And I think that's a good indication that we're going to see this idea hit more and more mainstream titles, so I think it's time we talked about this a little, because not only is it something that single-handedly transforms basically every game it's in, but it can also be reshaped and molded in so many ways that winds up serving each of the 3 example games I'm going to talk about here in vastly different ways. And speaking of, let's bring out our first game, shall we? As a wise man once said, Doom is boom. Doom 2016 and Eternal are lauded for quite a bit of what they bring to the table, as I've mentioned before, but chief among them all in my eyes is the glory kill. When an enemy is on death's door, they stop their rampage and flash for a short period of time in which you're able to go in and perform a special melee move that'll give you an incredibly violent murder animation and also provide you with a large helping of health drops. It basically turns enemies into a health pinata if you get to them in time, and if you don't, they basically just spring back into action with low health. And one other element about the system is that the amount of HP you gain from this is dictated by how low it was when you perform the kill. If you are on the brink of death, you get a lot back. If you were basically at full health, you don't get much. Now, this system is really clever because it's both a lifeline and a strategy. For a player who's maybe less adept at the game, Me? Someone who's getting by the skin of their teeth, glory kills can be a last-second savior that comes from the result of you incidentally getting an enemy in that state. There are health and shield items inside of most arenas in these games, but it's likely that you'll run out of these quickly if they're your main source of healing in a fight, or in some cases they might just be on the other side of where you are, or they're hard to remember the location of when you're being relentlessly pursued. So without the glory kill, being low on health would mean that the player is likely to either focus all of their attention on tracking down a health pack instead of ripping and tearing, or they would just give up altogether because the number of enemies is too great for them to take on with this health, so why bother? A lot of us have been there before. You play a tough game, you're maybe going against a boss that you've been fighting for a while, you're on attempt 27 and he hits you twice immediately and you're like, okay, screw this, just kill me so I can try again. But here, there's always a sliver of hope, and one that can only come about if you play this game aggressively, which is how it's meant to be played. It's very rare in these games to fully shy away from action because the action is the only chance that you might have of building up your defenses. It's genius. Like I said though, this setup also allows for more self-assured or cool-headed players to play strategically so that they always have a backup plan. The glory kill essentially allows you to turn all of your enemies into walking health packs, so sometimes it's good to dance around certain foes who have weaker resistance to a bullet being shot directly at their face, so that if you ever wind up in a pinch, which considering how tight these fights can get is almost guaranteed to happen, you can switch to a lower damage weapon, fire a couple shots into the fodder enemies, and all of a sudden it's like nothing happened. Doom and Doom Eternal are very aggressive games that want you to be constantly on offense, and they use that inherent identity to create a system that incentivized it no matter how close you were to death. It was a system that you could take advantage of at any time, and one that you could use as part of a larger strategy and set of chess moves. And the really interesting thing is, even though I always compare the two in my mind, everything that I just surmised about the glory kill mechanic in the Doom games is sort of the antithesis of the next system from the next game that I want to discuss. Let's have a little talk about one of my favorite games of all time, Bloodborne. Healing in Bloodborne is a bit more complicated, specifically with its limitations, than the healing in Doom. Bloodborne has carryable health packs by the way of blood vials, so you can access them easily at any time, unlike Doom's health pickups. But it's in Bloodborne's retaliative mechanic where we see just how different your healing is here in both execution and purpose. For those unaware, being hit in Bloodborne will not immediately and permanently take away a certain chunk of your HP. Instead, for a few short seconds following an attack, a portion of your health bar will turn orange, indicating that that's how much health is about to be taken off. And doing damage to an enemy while this is happening allows you to shorten that bar to the point where you can entirely nullify an enemy's attack if you deal damage fast enough. You can never exceed the health that you had prior to the attack with this method, you can only do that with a vial. But you can negate all damage that was just done to you while saving a healing item while doing a bunch of damage to your enemy. The rally system is incredibly fun and helpful, but it's far from being a lifeline. First off, if you lose all of your health, you're not able to rally back before you lose it all. You just die. You can't rally back from a killing blow. You also, as I mentioned, can only perform this action during a very small time frame and only as a direct response to getting hurt. This isn't something that you can look to get you out of a hole, it can only ever help you maybe prevent yourself from being in that hole to begin with. On top of that, the stamina bar adds another layer to all of this because you can only deal damage if you have stamina remaining, meaning partway through your rally you may have to back off, or you might go all in a rally, deplete all of your stamina, and then get hit right after because you weren't able to dodge with an empty bar. Bringing in yet another constraint, you can only pull this off if you have an appropriate opening. If you get hit twice in a row, the orange bars don't add up for you to rally it all back. You lose the health from the first hit altogether, and then you can only rally back from the most recent attack. And bringing in all these caveats is really just to say the rally system is not a get out of jail free card, okay? Bloodborne's unique method of retaining some of the health that you lost is far more focused and specialized to a specific scenario rather than permeating through an entire fight. It's in that distinction that we can see how two mechanics that are reminiscent of one another at face value can be transformed entirely to fit into the context and serve the intentions of the games that they're part of. I mentioned that Doom is inherently aggressive, even without the glory kill. In order for you to dodge enemy projectiles, you need to be monkeying around everywhere, and there's no parry or block or cover in this game, so you have to be playing offensive. What the glory kill does is allow you to use that to your advantage and make sure that no matter the situation, the player is always reminded of how they're meant to succeed. Because Doom is also a game where you need to split your focus across tons of enemies in a large area that you can freely and quickly move around in, it makes sense that this system allows you to use the enemies at any time to use as health. Bloodborne is a game where your focus is usually a lot narrower, with you fighting less enemies at a time and your movement being much tamer. And it's also a game where the player can get away with playing it overly cautious and timid despite it having a faster pace than the Souls games. You can actually succeed in this game by running back and separating enemies, going in for one hit at a time on bosses, bosses, and just generally playing it incredibly safe. The game wants to be fast-paced, but it's not actually a necessity here. So to counter that, the game made a system not where your aggression was necessarily rewarded, but one where your lack of aggression was punished. And that's a subtle difference, but for this game, it's absolutely perfect. If you get hit and back off immediately, you're, in theory, wasting a healing item in a lot of cases. And the game reminds you of that with this tantalizing orange bar. Every time that you do this, you're aware that you potentially made a mistake by not attacking even harder. By only giving you a limited time and a limited opportunity, the game uses its active healing mechanic in a way that's better served for fighting a lower number of enemies. The most broken thing in this game is that one rune where riposting an enemy gives you a certain amount of health back, meaning if you parry successfully, you can just regain health. That's about the closest as you can get to a glory kill-like system in a game like this, and thankfully it's hard to get and requires you to sacrifice other possible upgrades because that turns risk-reward into risk-reward-reward. The balance is just all off with that rune, but as far as the actual rally system goes, it manages to push players to a certain playstyle while not disavowing other ones. And when comparing that to Doom, I think we can see just how versatile active healing can be. But we're not done yet, because there's actually one more game that I wanted to talk about. Ultrakill makes Doom Eternal seem like it's in slow motion. I'll be honest, I'm horrible at Ultrakill. I've only recently gotten into PC games, so that might have something to do with it, I'm sure, but I still don't think in a million years I could do half the things that I've seen on Reddit, so bear that in mind when I talk about this. Thing is, even though I'm really bad, that doesn't stop me from going pedal to the floor $150 on a casual playthrough. Ultrakill is designed for you to basically be close enough to shake the hand of every person you kill. In this game, blood is fuel, and blood is also health. If you're standing close to an enemy who you've just severely maimed, the idea is that the blood hits your character and in doing so heals you and fuels your conquest. This is the type of game that if you describe it to other people, they'll think you're a psychopath. You might think that this system and Doom's are pretty similar to one another, and in some ways you're actually right. The most effective way to heal requires you to move around, attack relentlessly, and be in close proximity to your enemies. But a few things do wind up making this a whole other ballgame. First of all, there's no time frame where you can understand what's happening and act on it to gain your health back. It's an instantaneous thing. You're either close enough to get health or you're not. Second, and somewhat related, this requires you to perform the damaging attack from up close rather than being able to keep your distance and swoop in later, meaning your strategy is much more focused and comes down to positioning alone. You can't run around, get a hit off on someone and rush in to glory kill them. You need to put yourself in the right spot just before attacking. This makes the most difference with bosses. In Doom you're able to attack from afar, and usually that's actually what you want to do because being up close is suicide. And you can gain health from either limited pickups or the adds that are present in a lot of bosses in these games. In Ultrakill, they're more comfortable with having you go toe-to-toe 1v1 against an incredibly agile foe because you can recover your health at any point from the boss without needing a big finisher move. And that allows this to become, for the most part, Ultrakill's universal health system instead of needing to combine the active healing mechanics with conventional ones like the other two games do. Ultrakill kind of takes the rally system and allows you to gain health with it instead of just retain it. And you might remember that I said that would have ruined Bloodborne's system, but here it works because it has the caveat of you needing to put yourself in the most dangerous position possible in order to pull it off. A system like this wouldn't work in Bloodborne because in that game you're always doing damage up close. That's the only way to do damage. But here you could easily go the ranged route. It's a shooter after all, so asking you to put yourself in harm's way in order to protect yourself from harm is just absurd and genius. Out of anything I've played, Ultrakill has the biggest focus on pure risk-reward gameplay. It feels like you can only do well in the game if you play as risky as possible, which does remove a lot of the nuance that these other systems had, but it also injects everything with 3 times the fun factor. I think for a long time, healing systems were kind of treated like an obligation, part of a checklist for any given game. There were a few options, you thought, hey, what works for me, you figured it out, you did it, done. But I think in the last 5 years or so, we've seen developers come in and show us that if done right, this stuff can transform and define your game with a single simple idea, one that people can immediately identify and can even become the game's defining trait. I honestly think it's really cool how something as simple as health mechanics can impact a game to the degree that these do. And I don't think it's a surprise that these are some of the first games that we collectively think of when we think of fast, frantic, aggressive gameplay experiences. I can't wait to see how devs continue to expand on these ideas with upcoming games, and I also can't wait to permanently mangle my hands trying to play those games when they eventually come out.